Good evening. You are tuning in to AWANI Tonight with me, Cynthia Ng. Melaka votes on November 20th. Health experts urge not to let COVID guard down. And we take a closer look at ASEAN diplomacy. How effective is the bloc in bringing Myanmar out of a prolonged crisis? That's coming up. Melaka will go to the polls on November 20th. The Election Commission has set November 8th for nomination, giving parties 12 days to campaign. More than 295,000 people are registered voters. The EC is expecting a turnout of around 70% despite the pandemic. EC Chairman Dato' Abdul Ghani Saleh says measures are being put in place by the National Security Council, the Health Ministry and the police to ensure a safe election.
Perkara ini kita tak boleh bertolak ansur. Jadi kita berharap sangatlah para pengundi kalau boleh ya, janganlah turun kesemuanya pada waktu pagi. Ya, sebab kita ada waktu daripada pukul 8 sehingga pukul 5.30 petang. Waktu ni agak panjang. Jadi kalau boleh untuk warga-warga emas ni awal pagi okey, tapi yang muda-muda ni biarlah lewat sikit supaya tidak berlaku kesesakan. And then kita nanti akan ada kat cadangan ya, cadangan masa untuk keluar mengundi melalui kita punya sistem aplikasi kita ya. Macam My Sejahtera juga.
Early voters can cast their ballots on November 16th. The Melaka State Assembly was dissolved by Governor Tun Muhammad Ali Muhammad Rustam on October 5th after Datuk Sri Sulaiman Mat Ali lost majority support as Chief Minister. The prospect of holding an election while COVID-19 is still a threat to the population has stirred up debate on whether health or politics should take precedence. With the key dates confirmed for Melaka state elections, what should be the priorities be to ensure a safe election? We speak to Dr. Zainal Arifin Omar, President of Malaysian Public Health Physicians Association.
The authority should establish, monitor and enforce new strict SOP. Among others, we shouldn't have a big gathering. We must restrict the number of people in house-to-house campaign, as well as we should have some restriction and monitoring of people coming from outside Melaka. For example, people who are campaigning or joining the house-to-house campaign. At least whoever coming there should have completed their vaccines and do a self-test before they come in. The most important thing is the 2-week or 12 days campaign period where there is a lot of interaction and movement among people in the state and outside the state, and where the risk of new cases and new clusters. The Melaka state election will be a real-life situation and field testing for us to see the how we're going to live with this endemic. We can gauge the effective of our immunization program, plus the behavior of these people, and also how the authority monitored and enforced the regulation and procedures.
Meanwhile, UPM's public health specialist Dr. Malina Osman hopes that the SOPs set in place will be taken seriously as the COVID-19 situation may worsen if we let our guards down.
I feel regret and frustrated as the PRN of Melaka State need to be carried out despite our COVID-19 pandemic situation is still not over. And then the reason why the poll need to be done is something which can be avoided, yeah. But from legal point of view, we are left with no choice. All of us have to follow what being instructed in the available act, and then hopefully all those involved will continue the recommended SOPs, take it seriously, and we have just relief from recent wave, and then I think most of us have such difficult experience from the surge, as well as numbers of cases which very high recently. So we hope that everything will be okay, and all of us need to be actively remind each other so that we can avoid an anticipated of high cases or new clusters during the election.
The government will focus on one COVID-19 SOP for the country's transition into the endemic phase. Defence Minister Datuk Sri Hishamuddin Hussein said there are currently 181 SOPs. Pending approval from the Prime Minister, they will be reduced to one general SOP with 9 guidelines. The general SOP is related to fixed measures to control the spread of COVID-19, such as wearing masks, ventilation guidelines and MySejahtera check-ins. The 9 guidelines, meanwhile, will comprise activities in various sectors. The Health Ministry plans to meet with anti-vaccine groups to provide them with facts. Deputy Minister Datuk Dr. Nur Azmi Ghazali believes that the group had not been given clear explanation on the COVID-19 vaccines.
Apa kata kalau kumpulan yang anti-vaksin ini datang berjumpa dengan KKM? Berjumpa secara bersemuka, kita bincang, kita terangkan. Kita ada pakar-pakar kita, bukan kita buat keputusan sembrono. Kita buat keputusan atas kelulusan yang diberikan oleh NPRA melalui PKPD. Kita buat keputusan atas kajian dalaman dan juga kajian luar negara dan amalan-amalan yang selamat dijalankan di luar negara. Kita dah nyatakan bahawa vaksin ini bukanlah penyembuh. Vaksin ini adalah untuk meningkatkan imuniti badan kita dan dia bukanlah kata kita tak akan kena penyakit.
Nur Azmi was replying to a question from Senator Dr. Wan Martina Wan Yusof on the government's action against anti-vaxxers who had potentially exploited data on the COVID Now portal to influence others against taking the vaccine.
We'll take a short break. Stay with us.
Ayuh keluarga Malaysia, kita bulatkan tekad dan bersatu hati untuk terus memelihara serta mempertahankan kedaulatan negara. Sebagai keluarga Malaysia yang besar, kita harus bertoleransi dalam semua perkara. Hormat menghormati serta mengekalkan perpaduan rakyat yang berbilang kaum, agama dan bangsa serta integrasi nasional silang budaya adalah tunjang kekuatan kita sebagai sebuah negara bangsa yang berjaya. Umpama selembar benang dikait, ditenun dan dijalin, akhirnya menjadi kain yang sempurna indah.
Ayo kita zahirkan impian bersama, menjunjung semangat yang bernama keluarga.
Welcome back. Former U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell has died from COVID-19 complications. He was 84 years old. Powell, a retired 4-star general, rose to become the first African-American Secretary of State in the U.S. under Republican President George Bush. In a statement on social media, his family said he had been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Powell was a trusted military advisor to a number of leading U.S. politicians. He was also a key figure in the build-up to the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Myanmar will release more than 5,000 people jailed for protesting against the military government. Junta Chief Min Aung Hlaing said the prisoners will be freed to mark the Ding Yut Festival, or the Festival of Lights, later this month. According to Myanmar's local monitoring groups, more than 8,000 people have been arrested in protests across the country since the military coup in February. Some 1,100 civilians have been killed. The announcement of the amnesty came after ASEAN on Friday decided to exclude Min from an upcoming summit over the military government's handling of the crisis. Min said that the ruling military was committed to peace and democracy, and ASEAN should consider the provocations and violence in the country are being carried out by the opposition. ASEAN's move to exclude Myanmar's junta leader from a key regional summit this month and instead invite a non-political representative is effectively denying the legitimacy the military regime is seeking. This is a bold step for the consensus-driven bloc, which has traditionally favored a policy of engagement and non-interference. Here to dissect ASEAN's role in the Myanmar crisis is Thomas Daniel, Senior Fellow from ISIS.
The only parties that can actually solve the crisis in Myanmar are the Myanmar stakeholders themselves. And this includes the Tatmadaw, which triggered the crisis and the subsequent violence by launching the coup in early February. What ASEAN can really do is to play a supporting and a facilitating role. And it can only do this if it is allowed to do so by the local stakeholders. I think the fact that member states like Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam in particular, which were some of the staunchest advocates of the often misused non-interference stance. The fact that they agreed to this shows how much Myanmar's non-adherence to the 5-point consensus plan agreed in Jakarta and the continued use of ASEAN for its political cover in multinational forums has come to concern ASEAN.
Thomas stressed the importance of ASEAN to balance its approach and to engage with relevant stakeholders in helping to solve the crisis in Myanmar.
I think ASEAN needs to give very serious thought on what and how they plan to move forward with Myanmar beyond just the summit. You know, this crisis is going to be with us for the long haul, and it's probably going to outlast the next chairmanship of Cambodia. So there's not going to be any quick fix. There's no predictable roadmap here. And I think for its engagement to be effective, ASEAN needs to ensure that its strategies and resources are in place that are continuous and coherent. ASEAN needs to be very balanced here, and while the regional organization is not going to be able to engage with stakeholders like the National Unity Government in the short term, individual member states could do so. Some have already been doing so informally. However, ASEAN still needs to engage with the junta. The reality is that the Tatmadaw is a key stakeholder in shaping the foreseeable future of Myanmar, and you have to engage them. It needs to identify and actively work with dialogue partners which have actual influence in Naypyidaw. China, India, and Japan come to mind, as well as Track 2 and civil society organizations that have actual experience in mediating and operating in complex internal conflict zones.
Children back to school and masks no longer mandatory in the office. Australia's Sydney is easing more COVID restrictions as vaccination picks up pace. New South Wales hit a milestone of inoculating 80% of its adult population today.
Thousands of students in preschool in years 1 and 12 returned to the classroom on Monday, while others will get back next week. More people will also be allowed to gather at homes and outdoors as restaurants and gyms welcome more vaccinated patrons. Daily infections in New South Wales fell to the lowest in 10 weeks. The state government also announced that fully vaccinated international travelers will no longer have to undergo quarantine when they enter the state from November 1st.
China is considering a law to punish parents if their children exhibit very bad behavior or commit crimes. In the draft of the Family Education Promotion Law, guardians of children with such behavior would be ordered to sit through family education programs.
The draft law, which will be reviewed at the National People's Congress Standing Committee session this week, also urges parents to arrange time for their children to rest, play, and exercise. In recent months, Beijing has been more assertive in tackling the addiction of youngsters to online games, limiting gaming hours for minors for 1 hour on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday only. It is also clamping down on celebrity fan culture in China.
As we come to terms with living with COVID-19, what do we need to keep our eye on as we approach endemicity? Tonight on Consider This, we speak to our guests about underutilized tools in our public health toolkit. That is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. I'm Cynthia Ng. Thank you for watching.